Well, one of the nicest little formulations in the book, I thought, for what you're advocating was President Roosevelt's bold, persistent experimentation, and I wondered if you felt that really summed up what you were trying to convey.
Yes, I mean that achieving any complex objective is a process of iteration and adaptation. That's a contrast from the kind of model-based calculating structures that have been fashionable in the last 2 decades, which are predicated on a knowledge of the world that people not only don't possess, but can't possess, and the ways in which we make decisions, which are incremental and evolutionary and adaptive, and the way we achieve these rather complex objectives, which have these evolutionary type characteristics, are a response to a world that is constantly changing and which we have very imperfect knowledge of.
I thought it was very interesting when you were talking about Isaiah Berlin's famous formulation that the world divides into foxes and hedgehogs, hedgehogs knowing one big thing and foxes knowing lots of little things, that in the political sphere, it's the hedgehogs, it's those who sort of have one big idea who get the much better ratings. And I wondered if you felt that was a sort of potential impediment to the kind of thinking that you are advocating ever becoming more prevalent.
Well, right, I think it is. You know, whether it's in media or politics, a whole variety of areas of life, you know, people who claim to know the answers, you know, get a better hearing than people who understand that the world is complex and uncertain, and the way we learn is we make tentative moves and we make lots of mistakes. But in a complex environment, that is actually the reality. And that's why we have this paradox that hedgehogs make worse judgments but gain more applause in that situation.
I also thought it was interesting the contrast you made earlier in the book between those who are honest by policy and those who are honest by natural inclination. And I wondered if there was a comparison there with obliquity and whether one can learn to be oblique by choice, or if it's more innate than that, and the more you sort of focus on being oblique, perhaps the less oblique you actually are because it's calculated.
I think that's an interesting point, but actually I think a lot of being oblique is just letting our instincts rule. It goes back to this problem that we're trying to impose what we believe to be a structure of rational decision making on what is not only a natural mode of making decisions, which is otherwise, but the reality of how we are making decisions, which is otherwise. I think everyone has, you know, been required to fill in forms in some environment or other to in effect justify judgments they've already made or decisions they've already taken. We're going through a supposedly rational process that is actually a sham. And one of the things I want to say is let's acknowledge it's a sham.
And the culture of a lot of businesses today starts with the enunciation of a higher level objective, and then that's broken down into middle term objectives, and then that goes on people's appraisal forms and in sort of micro objectives. And by your reckoning, then that's a pretty vain pursuit for the company to be engaged in. Yes,
I mean, it's really an iterative process in which you discover more about your high-level objectives through the process of working through what I call goals and actions, so that you don't have a kind of knowledge which would be needed to impose that kind of structure in the first place.
Maybe I can ask you in conclusion, obviously we hope people will buy the book and absorb the ideas in more detail, but if you were to leave sort of one idea, one sort of mental exercise or thought experiment to get people thinking along the right lines, can you think what that might be?
I think the exercise goes something like this. Everyone recognizes, or almost everyone recognizes, that the way you become happy is not by pursuing happiness. Start thinking about other objectives which you have in life and ask whether that observation doesn't apply to them as well.
John Kay. Obliquity is published this month in hardback. You can find out full details about the book by going to Blackwell online at blackwell.co.uk. Thank you for listening, and until next time, goodbye.